don't teach your children not to waste. Rather, teach them mindfulness, you know? But I mean, if a child doesn't like something, forcing them to eat something they don't like or don't prefer at the moment, it's just teaching them to basically punish themselves, because the adult, first of all, is the parents are making something that they themselves like, and they're making something that they think that the child will like. A lot of times they're making that for the child. So if the child doesn't like it, the child had no choice, or had little choice in it. Whereas, the adults have kind of infinite choice of what they want to eat. So the child isn't really in a position of preference. So, that's already difficult. But then telling the child, oh, if you don't eat this thing that you don't even like, that's terrible, that's bad, that's like morally wrong. You're inviting in a lot of problems, because the child is your internal energy, and it's a little bit, basically you're making them eat shit, and then you're going to end up eating shit. So, no, that doesn't mean to give in to every ridiculous demand of a child. It's more of a general advice of use sensitivity when trying to figure out if a child is being obstinate, or just simply doesn't like something. Throwing away a little food or putting it in the refrigerator for you to eat later or something. I mean, for one thing, I don't like giving my child food that I don't myself like. There's one food he absolutely loves that I think is disgusting, but he loves it, and so that's great. But I'm not gonna eat mashed peas most of the time. Like some people will mash peas and boil them or something, and that'll be like a baby food. I wouldn't eat that, so I'm not gonna give that to my child, because they're not, the child's not gonna like it either. And you just can't force children to eat something they don't like, or you risk causing them a lot of psychological issues, forcing them to do stuff. So that's a major problem, and it'll produce issues in your own manifestation as well. So and even as an adult, you're eating a plate, there's a little bit left, and you're like, oh, I can't waste it, I should gorge myself a little bit to not waste it, to not sort of violate morality against this little parcel of food, this little few bites of chicken or whatever. That is also lack mentality, because wasting says, okay, there's something extra I didn't use. Eating everything, now you're finished and there's nothing left, right? And I see how when people, especially the more you focus on not wasting things, the more you'll just have nothing. So actually wasting a little bit is a very good sign of, is a very good, manifestation, what's the word? Sort of practice, yeah. I would say things like wasting just a little bit of your resources, almost intentionally, or being accepting of when waste does happen, buying fancier versions of very cheap items. So when you go to the store and you see, the really cheap green tea, but then you see expensive green tea and you're like, oh, well, maybe I should just get the cheap green tea. Get the expensive type. It'll be much better. You'll feel really good. You'll feel better about, having that thing. It enhances your life. And actually, financially, it's not even making a ripple. But in the moment that you're at the store looking at the shelf and seeing that, one packet of tea is or one box of tea packets is €1.50, and another one is $2.15. The difference between, middle to low quality to, something that's really, really good is half a euro. Is that really gonna make a dent? But I think this is something that and this is a little bit more on the side of impoverished people trying to use manifestation to their benefit. I think it's easy to be in poverty and then kind of like think that scrimping on every little dime is gonna save you, but then someone goes out to the bar and spends a lot of money, or on cable television, or something that they really don't need. And so then there's like, oh, well, I think a lot of times poor people, they need cable television. They need to go to the bar every so often or something. And some people just like that lifestyle, I suppose. But just there's a lot to it. There's nothing inherently wrong with finishing your plate. There's nothing inherently wrong with going out to the bar or watching cable. For a lot of people, to really get good channels, you're looking at about $140 a month or more. Probably more than that now. Etc. etc. So, yeah, there's just a lot of really basic things you can do that I've seen. Yeah, so these are just some different ways that one can kind of increase their manifestation and make life produce good results. And I think the big takeaway here is these activities really they really signal to your own consciousness, but some of them is just good sense, because when you like, a lot of it is even psychology. I think it's a good picture of the bridge between psychology and magic or manifestation. When you take out the mid tea and you steep yourself a cup of tea and you taste it and you're like, I think, at least for me, a part of me is like, almost as if having the less excellent tea is there's some element of suffering to that. As if I'm suffering in order to lend more money to something, but I know that it's really not any money at all. But then if you have a really nice cup of tea that is the more expensive tea, you drink that and you're like, and it's really excellent, and it sort of fulfills you and is more, it's more of a show of self-love, and it's also, you invested life force into yourself. Money is life force, so it's a very visible area where you've invested more than you maybe needed to, and that's a good signal to the self. That's a good signal of self-worth. And for me, everything is astrological. Everything I look at, I sort of look at the microcosm through the macrocosm. I think a lot of people go the opposite direction. A lot of people will go psychological first, then expand it. I think psychology isn't powerful enough to calculate a lot of the realities of the inner world and such. For one thing, it's quite new. So excuse me. Yeah, so you'll see though how magically better results just populate in your life, just appear absolutely magically. It's not about psychology. It's really a magical thing. It's something you couldn't placebo yourself into, although it is also in a sense a placebo. that's sort of the power of this. In fact, I would say placebo is a picture of the power of one's consciousness. I think also when you're scrimping, you're stressing yourself out thinking about scrimping, and I think a part of you knows you're making yourself suffer more than you need to, hence like poor mentality or lack mentality. I think this is where the manifestation community kind of confuses lack mentality and just the realities of poverty. Is like really the key of lack mentality, whether you're rich or poor, is someone with lack mentality will force themselves to suffer more than they really need to. Suddenly everyone's driving like assholes around now. Lol. It's the things you do that are just completely retarded that later you look back on them and you're like, what was I doing? This is so stupid, like, okay, on paper something costs more money, but like I feel so much better and it removes so much stress from my life that it's totally worth it. Or like, okay, it costs more money up front, but later it's cheaper or something like that. I would say it's even lack mentality. Sometimes notions, people will like buy the really expensive thing because they think that paying more will then mean they don't have to stress later, without doing research or exploring if such a thing really is, if the upgrade in if it really is an upgrade in quality, or if the upgrade in quality is even worth it. Like, for example, here I can buy Nutella, and it's okay. I don't really care for Nutella that much, to be honest. And then, I can go to the one store and get their fake Nutella, and I think it tastes better. But there's an even cheaper Nutella and an even closer store that, okay, I think there's less in it. It's a little bit less of a portion, but I finally went ahead and tried it just because we were out of Nutella and I wanted to make pancakes, palatschinke, and I finally got the off-brand Nutella from the different store, and it was even better. So, that's another thing, is like experimentation. A great way to defeat lack mentality, or just try to start cleansing your manifestations, is simply experimenting. And I think this is a little bit leveraging Mercury against Venus. You experiment, you try different things, and it starts introducing new variables and new patterns that can reproduce themselves. And then you can just watch the results and start to track what worked. A lot of people don't experiment. They just keep staying in the same, the same mental story, the same sort of the same dead end that, oh, I'm suffering, or just, a single identity. There's no need for that. In fact, one's identity is kind of an illusion anyways. I mean, think of it, if you were to go somewhere else and do something else, you would build a new identity. If you were in literally any life other than the one you're now in, you would build a new identity. You would. That's the nature of ego. And ego kind of controls manifestation and practically the whole consciousness. So I guess I might as well mention ego deaths at this point, because I think manifestation community and manifestation talk eventually leads into the conversation about ego death and what is ego and whatnot. A lot of spirituality now acts as if ego is the devil. I would say that's not exactly correct. I would say that manifestation, like, ego is sort of the vehicle through which you experience life, and it's the lens through which divine light comes into your life. It's a whole bunch of things, but you know, you can't really operate without an ego. You'll just continuously float. And that can be good or it can be bad. If you want to be in a very untouchable, if you want to be untouchable, basically, you can, keep your ego in this dissolved state, and you can just float away from practically anything, and that can be really helpful to some people. I think for most people, though, dissolving the ego temporarily is just a good medicine for a lifestyle that just doesn't work anymore, and then building a new ego, or building subtler forms of an ego that's situated in a more powerful place, in a greater nested reality, to climb to higher and higher galactic suns, in a way. But yeah, changing the state of mind, changing the ego at will, can change one's manifestation very quickly. One's manifestation is graded through one's astrological placements. So there's that, and it's also graded through the current transits. So there's kind of a lot of layers of filtration from mind to realization, and some people, what they'll do is they'll be very spiritual and very sort of renounced from the matter, and then supposedly that will cleanse their manifestations. I think typically people like that just don't have manifestations in such a particular way. Rather, they are themselves renounced. So they're just saying, nope, I'm not going to play the game. Not today, Durga. Not today, Maya. That's fine. I just don't find it very useful. I think that, the basic attitude there is one of, kind of, you're sort of disqualifying yourself from the game. To me, I don't see what the point of that is. So yeah. Anyways.